Is charging extra for non-dairy milk discrimination? Let's say you go get that latte. Lattes are already expensive. I think I once told the story about spending $7.75 on a latte. Many of you are outraged. So you go to the cafe, you order up a latte, and let's say it's $6.50. And then if you want to switch the regular milk for oat milk or almond milk or whatever the substitute is, cashew milk and the like, they'll charge you an extra $1, right? Well, does that amount to discrimination? Amongst those, the lactose intolerant, they can't have the milk. Is that discrimination towards them? South of the border, there have been a couple of class action lawsuits, one directed at Starbucks, another directed at Dunkin' Donuts, claiming that very thing, that charging the extra buck is discrimination. We wanted to find out more, especially from the Canadian perspective. Jeff Orenstein is on the line, founder of Consumer Law Group. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I like the dairy. I like my regular 3.5% milk for my latte. But if I go somewhere and they want to charge me $1 for oat milk, is that discrimination?
I've read the action in the U.S., both with regard to Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. And the way they're framing the case, their class definition has to do with people that actually do suffer from lactose intolerance. You need two conditions to be part of their class action. One, suffer from lactose intolerance and have, purchased from Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts and, paid more for a non-dairy alternative. Mm-hmm. And so they're framing the case under the Americans with Disabilities Act and saying, listen, if you have lactose intolerance, it is a health issue. It is considered a disability under the American with Disabilities Act. And therefore, you're charging more to those people, and that would be discrimination. The first thing that comes to mind when you think about the case is you think, well, okay, maybe it costs more for these products. And they were quite meticulous in their statement of claim in the U.S. And they talk about where for whole milk, for example, it's 3 to 5 cents per fluid ounce. Half and half, 9 cents, 19 cents, and cream 17 to 32 cents. Whereas when you take the alternatives, coconut, oat, soy milk, that's between 6 and 7 cents per ounce, meaning that, you can pay less for those type of alternatives than you pay for cream or half and half or whole milk. So it's not justified by, an extra price. So the question you got to ask yourself, is why are they charging more? If it doesn't cost them more for these alternatives, why do they give you free, other types of milks that are more expensive, but they charge extra for the alternatives? And so, I admit it's pushing the envelope a little bit on the discrimination, but, that's for me who doesn't have lactose intolerance. But, when you're looking at anything with regard to discrimination, you got to put yourself in their shoes, in someone else's shoes. And if I had that lactose intolerance and I really couldn't do anything else but put an alternative in, going to Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts probably would, make me feel that I'm being discriminated against. So I admit it's pushing the envelope. I haven't seen something quite like this, but it is interesting, and it very well may be justified.
But couldn't the counter argument be, 90% of people want the classic milk. Every time we have to go away from the regular, it costs us in efficiency, right? It costs us in time. Every time you make a substitution, it takes longer, and that slows down the process for everyone. We make less money. Couldn't that be the argument here?
So there's substitutions when you don't take regular milk. When you ask for, whole milk at 3.25 or cream, they have to reach in the fridge and pick up a different container also. So, they talk about that in this action also. There's no extra labor cost either. The standard is regular, 2% milk, sure. But they allow you to substitute, no problem, without charging you anything. So I'm not sure that would be, enough of a justification. You would normally need something, when you're dealing with something discriminatory, you have to look at, is it, undue hardship? And if the price is, the price differential, that would mean something to me. But and I haven't verified these numbers from the U.S. complaint, okay? But assuming those numbers are correct, that it really doesn't cost any more, and in fact, they're giving you free stuff that does cost more, it's not really justified. And you mentioned about the labor, and that doesn't seem to be justified either. So you do have to ask the question. A judge will ask the question, why are you charging more? If it doesn't mean extra costs, what's the reason? And just to go to Canada, because I heard at the beginning you comparing it to Canada. I mean, we don't have, obviously, the Americans with Disabilities Act because we're not American, but we do have, the human rights codes in every province. We have the Quebec Charter here in Quebec. So, you've got similarities there where you have discrimination based on various things, and health would certainly be, disability, health, that would certainly fall under that, that section of the Charter or the human rights code. So it's just as applicable in Canada, but the question is still the same. Does this fall under discrimination? Is lactose intolerance, protected the same as any other disability would be? And I don't have the answer because I'm not sure there is a clear answer yet. So that's why I say it may be pushing the envelope. But for a lot of people that have, lactose intolerance, that's probably an envelope they think is justified to be pushed. And I got to say, it sounds like something that the courts should consider. With
Jeff Orenstein, founder of Consumer Law Group, we're talking about a couple of class action lawsuits south of the border on charging more for non-dairy milk at a cafe, for instance. But Jeff, here's how I look. You mentioned pushing the envelope, right? And I say to myself, okay, well, there's also acts that you're not allowed to discriminate against religion, let's say, right? Right. And let's say it's against your religion, right? To have a certain product, maybe it's milk, and I can't do it. Doesn't that open the door to anyone saying, well, for this reason, I can't have this product. You must give me the substitute at the same price. Like I'm wondering if this were to go through, other doors it would open. I don't know if we want to live in that kind of place.
So I agree with what you're saying. I mean, just take an example. There's certain milk, if you're Jewish and religious, you sometimes need a type of milk that's actually particularly kosher. So that could certainly be one example. And you're right, it does sort of open the door, and that's where the courts really have to look at it, saying, all right, is this something that we want to do or not? But it's not a simple question there. But if you talk about a kosher milk, it may be justified where you say, all right, it costs more for that milk. And by the way, one thing that you and I are not considering is maybe, and I'm just throwing this out there because I don't really know the answer, and you'd have to get into discovery in the U.S. to find out. But maybe because Starbucks, have so many stores across the U.S., I think they got, thousands of them. I think it says 34,000 coffee stores worldwide and 15,000 in the U.S. Maybe they buy their milk products at a special rate that you and I can't get at the grocery store. So maybe because they buy so much of it, it really is, in fact, cheaper. I don't know. We haven't really gotten to the discovery stage here where we're going to find out what the real facts are. I'm sort of just reading what's in the U.S. complaint, but it may be that they don't pay those prices. They buy, millions of gallons of milk every year, and so they buy it, for cents on the dollar that you and I could never get. And so when you get the alternatives there, they're buying it in much smaller quantities, and therefore it does cost more. I'm sort of putting out some ideas here. But yours is more, where does it end when you start getting into, when you start covering everything under the disability claim? That is something the courts are definitely going to be grappling with in the years to come. And I'm not sure I have the insight to tell you where it ends and where it begins. I know that the courts have held undue hardship becomes where it ends. But where exactly that is in every case, that's sometimes hard to determine.
And it sort of goes against, what you think about, businesses are allowed to make decisions over what they charge for certain things. We see it all the time. You buy a car in one color versus another color. Well, it's $3,000 more for paint, for a different color paint. And I look at that. Of course, this isn't about a disability in that situation. Correct. But I also go down the path. Well, there are so many decisions that businesses make because they know that's how they can maximize profits, right? Okay, got to leave it there, Jeff. Great discussion.
Okay, thanks.
That's Jeff Orenstein, founder of Consumer Law Group.